On the latest episode of Veep, we are talking Jonah and the birther movement, Richard's interaction with a lobbyist, and Selina's never-ending problems. It's Super Tuesday. Stay tuned.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
What's up, Veep fans? Today we are dissecting the latest episode of Veep. Happy Monday, Super Tuesday. Everything is fine and dandy over here, especially for Selina, who, despite getting in all sorts of mishaps, always manages to find something out of this mess of a situation. Something always happens, and it's always something catastrophic, and then hurrah for her in the most messed up fashion ever. Before we get into everything, I am your host, Mina Wahab, and I love talking politics, and I love comedy, and it's especially beautiful and magnificent when you can combine both politics and comedy, and that's exactly what Veep does so brilliantly. I can never get tired of this. I watched this episode twice, like basically in the same day. And I laughed both times, which is very rare and very hard to do when you're watching a TV show. That means the writing is phenomenal. But the way we're going to break down this week's episode is we're going to do a character-by-character breakdown. So I'm going to start off talking about Jonah and then Dan and, the minor characters. And then finally, we're going to focus on Selina towards the end of this review because there is so much there with Selina that I want to give it the proper amount of time. And I want that to be the last thing we talk about. And then after that, we're going to have our very special segment, What Trumps Veep, where I'm going to give you guys 3 different quotes. And Jonathan in the booth, our engineer, our very special engineer, is going to have to guess, did this quote come from President Donald Trump? Yeah. Or did it come from the Veep show? And at this point, it is so hard to tell the difference. That's why it's so funny because, art imitates life, and that's the beauty of this show. Everything has some sort of parallel.
It's insanity.
It honestly is insanity for sure. But let's get right into it. Let's talk about Jonah's character. In the beginning of this season, I kind of was annoyed with Jonah because I felt like his character was like too intense, too much, and that they were just like running out of things to do. But in the last couple episodes, I'm starting to really like him again and get a huge kick out of the stuff that he does because it's pure insanity. It's so irreverent. It's crazy disrespectful, but at the same time, there's a huge parallel here that I'm sure many of you guys are already recognizing. So Jonah's character arc in this episode, it basically starts with, Amy, the chief of staff, the Kellyanne Conway, if you will, of this episode and of this season, is essentially coming up with a game plan for Jonah and for his campaign. So Jonah is turning 38 years old. So her idea is, okay, let's fundraise or have your people donate $38 because it's your 38th birthday, which isn't a bad idea. The funny parallel here is that Bernie Sanders actually managed to do that with, a massive amount of people donating small campaign contributions as opposed to having lobbyists who will donate $25 million here, $1 million there. It's more like getting a group of people who are extremely loyal to the cause, especially if it's grassroots or the people who have been neglected or the working class, whatever, and them pooling their money to donate $38 each. And Jonah's not a fan of this idea. For whatever reason, he doesn't like it. He's like, you know what? If Selina Meyer were to do this idea, she would get $1,000 per person because she's 1,000 years old and she always lies about her age, and I can't stand that. And it turns into this whole thing about Selina lying about her age, and it becomes a birther movement. So when I say that, the reason I call it a birther movement is because Jonah has this rally and he's getting everybody at this rally completely riled up by saying, where are you from? Or how old are you really, Selina Meyer? And everyone starts chanting along with him, when are you from? When are you from? As opposed to where are you from? And it's kind of a nice and weirdly interesting callback to the time Donald Trump actually did this with President Obama. There was the whole birther movement where they were like demanding to see his birth certificate because they kept saying, oh, Obama isn't even American, he's from Kenya or wherever he's from. And Donald Trump kept doing that again and again and again. And there was a whole movement of birthers who just didn't believe that President Barack Obama was an American. And the irony of all of this is the fact that Jonah Ryan is starting this birther movement, and he's not even American. He's Canadian. He has a Canadian citizenship, and that's where he was born. And to run for president, you actually have to be born in the United States. That's one of the qualifications. You can't be from Canada. You can't be from anywhere else. You have to be born in the United States of America. So he shouldn't even be in the running. If anyone finds out that he's from Toronto, it's done. It's done for Jonah, unless they somehow manipulate the rules or something else happens, but I doubt that's going to happen. So they start the whole, like, when are you from chant, and it gets interesting because Jonah finally finds his birth certificate and he shows it to everyone, but then it gets really tricky because he realizes his father is actually second cousins with his mother. And he makes a comment about, how could you do that? I could have ended up messed up. And that's the humor in it all, is that he is kind of like a messed up human being. And he has a lot of issues. So that's why it's so funny. But let's move on from Jonah. As much as I love his character, we don't have a ton of time to spend on other people if we just talk about Jonah the entire time. So I'm going to quickly gloss over Richard. And, now Dan is working for Richard. He is his new chief of staff because in last week's episode, Dan slept with Selina Meyer and he's no longer welcome. He's not part of that campaign anymore. He's moving on to bigger and better things. And the whole issue with Richard is that Dan has set up this meeting with Sydney Purcell, who represents family farms, and he owns a bunch of steak restaurants. And he's a lobbyist, essentially. He wants to bribe Richard and say, you know what, there are these new pesticide regulations. I don't really like that. There's actually a really nice cozy governor seat opening up if you listen to what I say. And Richard is not having any of this. He's kind of an airhead about it. He's like, oh, I don't really want to be governor. I don't want to be in the Senate or whatever. I'm good. I'm fine. And apparently Sydney Purcell paid to have 7 studies say that the pesticides don't cause cancer, because Richard was saying, oh, but these pesticides are harmful, they cause cancer, how could you? And he's like, no, we actually paid for 7 studies to refute that. So it's comical in a really depressing way, is the fact that you can like pay for things in this world to support whatever cause you want. And like everything is like, not everything, but a lot of things are driven by money. If you have money, you have access. If you have money, you have privilege, and you can affect the way people think about things. And you can cause a lot of harm just by having a lot of money and therefore having a lot of power. So, Richard doesn't take the bribe. I don't think he consciously turns down the bribe. He just doesn't take it. And good for him, because he ends up getting promoted or like getting a new spot at the end of the episode as the new lieutenant governor. So things are looking up for Richard. And now Dan has like a nice fancier job now that, like, when Richard goes up, Dan goes up now. That's how it works. So Dan has to like be excited about that. So now let's talk about everything else. The episode actually starts out with Selina's staff telling her, okay, you're up in Texas, you're up in North Carolina, you're up in Massachusetts, your numbers are getting better there, but you're not doing well. Like, but now we have to like go to Virginia, we have to go to Alabama, we have to go to Oklahoma City. And there's a comment about how Kemi is getting full protection from Secret Service. And my favorite quote in this whole episode is when Selina Meyer's like, what kind of affirmative action bullshit is that? Because Selina doesn't get her own Secret Service staff. But at the same time, Kemi is also getting death threats, so she needs the staff, and she's getting like really intense death threats. But with Selina is saying, okay, like, I need death threats now. Just make up some death threats that are nicer, because she like has her staff read all these death threats, and they're really mean, and they're like about her image and about how her arms are really big and how she's old. And she's like, no, we can't do those death threats. We have to do other ones. So it's just really comical and funny. And that's what I really like about this episode, is just you literally laugh out loud watching this. I mean, Selina Meyer is such a hateable and lovable person, and I don't understand how you can be both. And it takes a really great actress. I mean, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she came from Seinfeld, and she was so lovable in that show, and then she plays like this politician in Veep that's so cutthroat and intense and not loving with her daughter, doesn't spend a lot of time with her, very self-interested, just wants to get to that goal. Isn't a kind person, is just very cutthroat and doesn't have a ton of empathy and is very, egotistical and self-centered, and at the same time has a lot of insecurities. So it's so hard to have all those negative qualities and still somehow be such a lovable character. We love Selina Meyer. I don't know about you. She's like the best part about this show, and I wouldn't be surprised if she got her millionth Emmy for the last season of Veep. She's doing amazingly well. So let's talk a little bit about Selina. I've broken it down by all of the different obstacles she's facing here, because it is a lot. It's honestly a lot to go over. So there's the whole China and Quinn ordeal, and what's going on with that is, like, remember that China gave $25 million to Selina Meyer. And it's a huge campaign contribution. Obviously, when you have that much money, you're tied to them in a certain way. But at the same time, she can't have people knowing that she accepted $25 million from China. So she's trying to get rid of all evidence that $25 million even exists. So she ends up telling Gary, like, we need to spend this money as fast as possible. Just spend it on anything. Gary ends up spending it on Bibles for the homeless. So, yeah, that... honestly, like, I can't even. That's so ridiculous. Like, have Gary solve that problem. I don't understand why she couldn't just use the $25 million for anything else. That was, like, such an annoying feeling. Is like, why are you having Gary, like, allocate $25 million for this? You could have done so many other things with the money. Like, why did you do that with the money? Like, there's no trace of it. You could have done anything else. So I guess that was kind of one of my pet peeves of the episode. Is it was silly, and it was also annoying because I'm like, I wish they did something else with the money instead of squandering it like that. I wish they squandered it in a different way. But I guess there still was, like, a funny payoff at the end where she's like, Gary, like, how could you do that? And he's like, I just hope that, they don't use it as toilet paper, and they don't use the New Testament for that. So it was like a little funny. So we also have some stuff going on with Selina and Andrew, because, as you know, in this episode, Andrew finally comes clean and says, yes, I have these sketchy financial dealings with the Meyer Fund, and your name is all over it, Selina, because I forged your signature, and this is on you now. And they're like, okay, we need to find a fall guy. They realize that Keith Quinn is connected to the Chinese, and he's the one who's been in communication with them, and he's handling all of this. And they also realize that Andrew knows Keith Quinn as Luther, because I guess there was some sort of, like, shark gambling thing that he met him in the past, like, years ago. So they're all scrambling right now. Selina and Andrew are scrambling to find a fall guy. So who is going to take the fall for all these misdeeds, these financial misdeeds? And they immediately think Gary. And she's like, no, Gary's not smart enough to be pinned for that. Like, no one's going to believe that he was capable of doing this fraudulent thing. So then they realize, okay, maybe we can do Catherine's soon-to-be fiance, and that doesn't work because Marjorie's super strong. She's not going to take that BS. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, like, how is this going to work? Who's the fall guy going to be? And the whole time I'm thinking, who is the fall guy going to be? They have to choose somebody. And part of me was like, are they going to choose Catherine? Like, is that going to happen at all? Because that would be extremely evil. Or even if they chose someone like, I don't know, like a rival opponent, or I feel like they could have done a lot with that. But what ends up happening, you guys watch the episode, Andrew decided that he needs to board the Labor Day, which is his boat that actually never sank, and he's going to head to Israel by way of Cuba, but the boat explodes. And why does it explode, guys? It explodes because Selina tells Keith to take care of it. And what does take care of it mean? apparently it means kill Andrew, so there's that going on. It's very dark, but none of us care. Like, no one cares that Andrew is gone. You know, I don't care. If you care, share it in the comment section below, but I don't even think he's really gone. I think there's something else going on. I don't think there's any way that boat exploded and that he's on it and he's dead. I think he's going to come back somehow and mess everything up. That's my prediction, but we'll get into all of that later. Quite possibly my favorite part of the entire episode, other than Selina being a scummy politician and trying to like deflect all of this horrible stuff going on with her and pin things on Kemi's husband and say Kemi's husband evades his taxes and Kemi's husband does this. Like, that's literally what she does in this episode, is she tries to take the attention off of herself by like blaming it on Kemi's husband, and that backfires. It does not work well. It works well in the beginning, but then afterwards it's not really effective. And this is something that we see other politicians do all the time, where we see that Trump is being blamed for something. For example, Donald Trump has been like blamed for so many different things, and instead of answering questions directly or like saying, no, I have nothing to do with Russia, or there is no collusion with Russia, or no, there is none of this, he usually will be like, he'll say something like, oh, well, Rosie O'Donnell's fat. He'll like just say something completely unrelated and like diss someone else and take all of like the focus and the emphasis off of himself and onto someone else. So that's the parallel that I saw there. I saw a lot of Trump and Selina Meyer parallels, which is great because we're going into our special segment very soon. But before that, I have one last comment that I want to go over, and that's the fact that other than being on Mike's new show and, you know, having things translated by Mike's adopted daughter who speaks Mandarin, Selina also has some other things going on. And the funniest part of the episode, in my opinion, was when she conjured up this lady, Rosa Sanchez, out of thin air. And politicians, I feel like, really do this sometimes, where they'll have these anecdotes where they talk about Joe Schmo or Joe the Plumber or some random person that's relatable to the public. Especially, they have to be relatable to the demographic that politician is pandering to at the moment. So if they're going to a rally in middle America, they're going to talk about Joe the Plumber. If they're going to colleges, they're going to talk about, oh, Mary, who is an undergrad who faces so much student loan debt and college should be free. So this is what politicians do. They talk about a specific anecdote about one specific person so that you get to care about that person and that message can resonate with whoever their audience is. And it's brilliant marketing. It's how things are done. And so she conjures up this girl, Rosa Sanchez, who's from El Salvador. And apparently Rosa Sanchez is a real person who lives in Tennessee and has 4 kids and all this other stuff. She is a real human being. And Rosa Sanchez is being deported to Mexico for whatever reason. She's an illegal immigrant. She's being deported. And there's a meeting at the very end of the episode where Selina Meyer is like just received news of Andrew's death, and she goes out and she sees Rosa and she goes and hugs her and she goes, ah, Rosa, my good friend. And then the lady whispers, or like Gary whispers in her ear, like, oh, that's not Rosa. And then she goes and she turns and then she realizes she's like hugging the wrong Hispanic lady and it's another Hispanic lady. So it just shows you like, oh, the disingenuousness, I don't even know how to say the noun form of disingenuous, but the disingenuous nature of politicians and how it's all this game. It's all like, okay, like smile and pretend to be warm and empathetic, but in reality, you don't even care about this person's plight, which is so bizarre to me. Like, how are you campaigning to hold the highest office in the country and you don't care about the people you're representing? Freaking wild. It blows my freaking brains. I don't get it, but it is what it is, right? But share your comments in the comment section below if you're watching on YouTube. Tell me what your favorite part of the entire episode was, because I really, really want to know. I feel like there were so many great one-liners. If you have a favorite quote or a favorite moment, share it in the comments. And then next week when Amy comes back, we're going to like read those out loud on air and shout you guys out. So you can be famous for like 2 minutes. So that wraps up essentially the entire episode. let's get into our special segment right now because I am super stoked for What Trumps Veep, where we tell you, yes, this is basically our way of playing a game with Jonathan in the booth, our engineer, and he's, yes, I love this music, by the way.
I do too.
This is perfect. So Jonathan, are you ready for this game?
I am. Let's do it.
Who do you think you know better, Selina Meyer or Trump?
Probably Selina Meyer.
Yeah, I feel like you know Selina Meyer really well. All right, so these quotes were either taken from Donald Trump or Selina Meyer or the entire episode of Veep as a whole. You have to guess where this came from. So quote number 1.
Let's do it.
That's Washington, D.C. for you, ... District of, and then the C word. I can't say it on air.
All right. If that's Trump or Selena, I have a sneaking suspicion that that's probably Selena, seeing as Trump would get lit up for that. But who is it?
It is Selina Meyer.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
I feel like Donald Trump has said worse though.
Oh, I'm sure he has.
And I feel like it is very similar because he always talked about draining the swamp of scummy politicians in DC. So it is a very Trump thing to say as well. But you are correct.
Awesome.
You are correct. You're on point. All right, quote number 2. My fingers are long and beautiful, as it has been well documented, are various other parts of my body.
Oh my goodness. I really want to say Selena just because it sounds like it, but I also want to say Trump because it really does sound like something he could have said in the past.
Well, what?
You know what? I'm going to go for Trump.
I mean, what other body part would be long and beautiful on a woman? Oh, legs, maybe. I don't know. My mind is so disgusting right now. But yes, Donald Trump is correct.
Oh, I got it. Woo!
Oh my God,
Awesome.
Jonathan, you were killing it.
Yeah, let's do it.
You're 2 for 3 right now. Let's see or you're 2 for 2. Let's see if you can be 3 for 3.
Right
Our
on.
final quote. I beat China all the time. All the time.
Oh my goodness. That seems like it. I feel like you're tricking me. I feel like you're tricking me.
I mean, this whole episode was about China.
Oh, that's true. I'm going to go with Selena on that one.
It was Donald Trump.
Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
I know. I had to choose that quote because the whole episode was about China and China collusion in the election. But Trump talks about China all the time. I feel like I could get a mashup video of him just being like China. I'm not gonna do the impersonation.
Hold your fingers and potato chips. And
my long fingers, my long Trump fingers, as I say it. Yes, China.
That was awesome. 2 out of 3 though.
Okay, so we're gonna do some quick predictions, and Jonathan, I want you to join me on this segment.
All right, let's do it.
Prediction.
All right, so we got like a little sneak peek of what's to come, and it seems like now in next week's episode they're gonna be talking a little bit about foreign policy experience. And there's like some joke in the teaser saying like, oh, that half-wit Kemi has no foreign policy experience. And they're like, oh, you mean it's pronounced half-white Kemi. So there's like all this stuff going on. It looks like, hopefully soon to be President Selina Meyer. She's like schmoozing with all these like foreign diplomats and who knows what's going to happen. But what do you think's going to happen next week?
Oh, man. Well, I think she is probably going to get knee-deep into her legal matters for sure. I'm trying to think. I am a little at a loss with some of what's going on when it comes to that. Let me think.
Well, the way this episode ended, so basically it was like a huge victory for her because the way this episode ended was that we figure out that Andrew, dies. And for whatever reason, and I'll tell you the exact reason why this is good, this is great news for Selina Meyer because she is basically saying, oh my God, like she's like crying, like she feels so horrible that Andrew Meyer died. But then they get word that because Andrew died, that they are dropping the investigation into the Meyer Fund. And the Washington Post is also getting rid of their entire series of stories of election interference. So Andrew dying basically saves the day for Selina Meyer.
Somehow I feel like this is going to line up with the whole no collusion.
Yes.
Just in some form or fashion, I feel like it's going to line up.
The whole
in some goofy
how
way.
we found out that there was no collusion with Russia, with the whole Trump conspiracies and Russian conspiracies, and now it's going to line up in Veep, and they're going to start saying the same thing.
No cemented collusion has been found. So yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to try and line it up in that way.
I feel like that's exactly what they're gonna do. We're basically on the same page with our predictions. For our Veep fans who are tuning in, let us know in the comment section what your predictions are on YouTube, and make sure that if you're listening to us on iTunes that you give us a 5-star rating, and let us know how we can improve, how we can do better, and what you like about the show. We love taking your feedback, and I'm so excited for Amy to come back next week because she makes this show so exciting and so much fun, and I love talking to you about it too, Jonathan.
Yeah.
So yes, hope you all have a happy Monday for this Super Tuesday episode. I love talking politics. I love movies. I love pop culture. You guys can all find me on social media at Mina Makes Magic and hear all my other rants and ramblings and everything else. See you all next week.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.